When a good Samaritan saved 4 birds, he believed he had done a decent and kind deed. However, a short while later, he received the most stunning and incredible reward for his goodness. It was a spectacle that, in reality, had to be seen to be believed. Joseph Sikar was a guy who resided in Triplicane, one of Chennai's oldest neighborhoods, a coastal Indian city. In addition to following his interest for photography and camera work on the side, he made a career as an electrician. Joseph didn't have anything particularly unique about him. He was just a regular guy leading a regular life, but he experienced something entirely out of the usual one day. Joseph awoke early one morning and made himself a pot of coffee. It was always good for him to get some caffeine in his system before he started his day. As he sipped on the coffee, Joseph opened the door to his terrace to let the cool morning air in. But that's when he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. Something small and green was in the corner of the terrace. Now Joseph didn't keep much out there, only a chair and a small table, so to see something so vibrant and colorful was a bit of a shock. That shock was made even larger when he turned his head to study the object tucked away in the corner of the terrace. Joseph's eyes went wide as he fully noticed what he was looking at. It wasn't one single small green object, but rather 4 of them. 4 gorgeous emerald green parakeets. These relatively small birds were quite an intelligent species, and they love warm and temperate climates, which is what makes them so common in India. Joseph had seen plenty of parakeets before, but none this close. It struck him as very strange. Why were they there? Why weren't they flying away as Joseph approached them? It was certainly a strange and confusing series of events. Parakeets are fairly common around these parts, remembered Joseph, thinking back to the first encounter, but they tended to keep to themselves and didn't really bother people. Every now and again they'd be brave and swoop in and steal scraps of food if I left a plate on the terrace, but then they'd fly off again. They'd never stick around. Now the region had recently been hit by a typhoon. Thankfully, Joseph's home was spared, but many buildings had been destroyed, and people had even lost their lives. Not even animals had got away scot-free, and it seems that the budgies sitting on Joseph's terrace were 4 such unlucky victims. The birds seemed battered and bewildered, and they had damaged wings, making it seemingly impossible for them to fly. So Joseph did the only thing that made sense to him. He took pity on them and went into the house to try to find them some food. He hadn't owned any birds before, so it wasn't like he had any seed that he could give to them. So instead, he brought them some rice. The parakeets excitedly made a chirping noise at Joseph as he approached, and gratefully took the rice from him, making short work of it. For several days, the birds remained on the terrace, eating the rice and drinking the water that Joseph provided. It was clear that the TLC was having some effect, and the birds looked to be gaining strength and health with each passing day. Eventually, though, the parakeets were well enough to start to try flying again. After a few failed attempts, it seemed like the little green birds were starting to regain their confidence and their ability to fly. And all the while, Joseph would sit at the other end of the terrace and watch on, proud that he was able to help the little birds in some small way. Would they have survived if it wasn't for him? We can't be sure. But what we are certain of is that the 4 parakeets had much more of a fighting chance with Joseph on their side. Slowly but surely, the parakeets started to return to normal, but with one distinct difference. They were no longer intimidated by the presence of Joseph. It appears like they accepted him because they knew he was there to assist them. They started to flutter, flap, and fly all over the patio, occasionally going into the open before immediately turning around. They appeared to have made Joseph's terrace their new residence. The 4 parakeets had started to garner some attention from neighbors. They were not used to the beautiful little emerald green birds being so sociable and close, and they often complimented Joseph on being special, and the chosen one that the birds had selected to stay with. I believe that kindness is kindness no matter whether you are an animal or a human, said one of Joseph's neighbors. There is clearly some sort of mystical and divine trust between the 4 birds and the man, and it's something that should be celebrated and encouraged. The world needs more love and help in it, and Joseph is doing his small part to make the world a little bit better. He's a good man. Of course, Joseph had grown quite fond of the little birds. He had never had any pets before, but found that he really enjoyed being around the parakeets, feeding them, watching them, and caring for them. Unfortunately, though, there was someone less pleased about the arrival of the birds. Joseph's landlord had gotten wind that he was keeping the birds as sort of pets, and he commanded Joseph to either get rid of them or move out of the rented property. Of course, Joseph argued that they were on the terrace, a place open to the elements and animals. One morning, though, Joseph awoke and walked out to the terrace and saw something quite sad. All 4 parakeets were perched on the edge of the fencing, and one by one they flew off. This time, they headed out towards the sea and away. Joseph sadly smiled. He had played his part. He had been a kind neighbor and had improved the lives of those 4 tiny birds. His attention was firmly concentrated on the 4 parakeets to which he had become accustomed as he gently turned and entered the home. His landlord would at least be happy with the outcome, but shortly something will occur that would totally astound Joseph and the rest of Chennai's citizens. It really was something that had to be seen to believe. You see, after a week or 2 of life returning to normal, the parakeets finally came back. But it wasn't just the 4 of them. They brought friends. It started with 1 or 2 extra birds, and then, as each day passed, more and more would flock to Joseph's terrace. It seemed that the 4 parakeets had somehow communicated that the terrace was a safe place, and that Joseph would not harm them. In their own way, it was as if they were thanking Joseph and showing him that they trusted him. By returning with their friends and family, Joseph was touched, and his heart would swell with pride every time more birds would show up. Initially, after the first 4 flew away, 5 or 10 parakeets used to come, Joseph said, remembering back to how his collection of birds started to grow. Soon within a year, more than 1,000 parrots started coming, and the number continued to grow. Now at least 300 parrots come here in any season. During the rains, their number swells up to even 60. During cyclones, these numbers increase further. They dislike the heat. Their number increases in the winter and rainy seasons. And my landlord is not happy. Not that I care. Nowadays, several long years after the bulk of the story, Joseph has a grand collection of birds that come to his terrace on a regular basis. Whether they are looking for food or seeking shelter, Joseph is happy to provide them with whatever they need. And every now and then, he has to pinch himself at the sheer amazingness of the situation. People stop and look and marvel at the beautiful sight of so many birds gathered together, and it's all thanks to being kind to those 4 little parakeets that he saw all those years ago. In fact, it's no wonder that Joseph became known as the Birdman of Chennai. So now it's over to you. What do you think of this incredible story? Have you ever heard of something so strange and unusual happening? Would you have taken care of the parakeets if you were in Joseph's shoes? As always, we love to hear from you, so be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below.